Okay, so if it's alright, I'd like to talk a little bit about some stuff in the YouTube language community that just I feel like viewers need to know. I feel like this is kind of the elephant in the room, and I've been very silent about it for a long time. I think you and I are trying to be the nice guy on YouTube. We don't we don't want to get into any drama or anything, but for the benefit of all those people watching and really serious about learning languages, I think there's a couple things that we got to tell them.
But I think what happens is there's this phenomenon called the fluency illusion. People don't really stop and think about the fact that, you know, they don't know how good other people are. And a lot of times they are at a really, really kind of low level. It'd be like the equivalent of you took guitar lessons for like 3 weeks and you can play like 1 or 2 songs like really crappily. That is kind of like they can do that for like a bunch of different languages, and there's this illusion that it's really impressive when in reality it's not.
Yeah, so that's the other reason I was kind of scared to talk about this, is people are making a bank off of this, and if I go out there and say anything to jeopardize their livelihood, you know they're gonna come after me.聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。僕の声も聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえますよ。よかったです。マットさん、おはようございます。
おはようございます。
今、ポットランドは何時ですか？
その6時ぴったりです。その午後の。こちらは、こんにちはですよね。
なるほどね。ごめんなさい。まあ、東京は朝の9時なんですけど。うん、まあ、
いいですね。もう明日ですよね。
さすが、世界の反対側に住んでいますね。時差があるんです。
まだ昨日にいるんで、こちらは。
はい。もうちょっと緊張していますけど、許してください。
いや、僕も緊張してるんで、全然大丈夫ですよ。
まあね、語学の話をする前にちょっと考えたんですけど、私の視聴者はね、多分マットさんのことを知らない方がいっぱいいるから、簡単な自己紹介をしてもらえませんか？
はい、ぜひ。
はい、よかったら、はい、お願いします。
はい。はい。マットと言います。アメリカ人なんですけど、独学でアメリカに住みながら日本語を覚えました。で、今は YouTube で活動してまして、マット VS Japan っていうチャンネルで、その言語学習についての動画を作ってます。よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。ですね、私はアメリカ人で、今、東京に住んでいます。2012年初めてアジアに引っ越して、海外生活はもう8年目になりましたね。最初に中国語を勉強して、その後5年前から日本語を勉強して始めました。日本語学校に通っていて、その後、早稲田大学の短期留学のエクスチェンジプログラムに入って、そこで半年ぐらい勉強しました。はい、よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。
Okay, so now that we did a little self-introduction, if it's okay, I got a lot of stuff I want to say. The first thing I really wanted to get into is the idea of being a polyglot. I wouldn't consider myself a polyglot. I speak Chinese. I've studied it for 8 years and then Japanese for 5 years. Maybe I'll take on Korean, but I'm not yet fully committed to that. But the idea of learning many, many languages, I think it's a cool idea, but at the same time, I think a lot of the videos out there, and I'm not going to say any names because one, I don't feel the need to harass anybody, and two, a lot of this stuff is people's livelihoods, and quite frankly, if you go after someone's livelihood, then they'll go after you. Realize people are making a lot of money off of this. A lot of money. I talked to some of the sponsors because I also promote some language learning software, and they told me about this channel and that channel, and it made this much money, or it sold this much. It was like, whoa, people are making, I'm not even joking, Matt, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars from these polyglot channels, and
this is making me reconsider my position.
Yeah. I couldn't help but feel like they didn't know the language themselves. Like, why they're selling it, but they didn't for different languages, but they didn't necessarily know that language well. Yeah, so that's the other reason I was kind of scared to talk about this, is people are making a bank off of this, and if I go out there and say anything to jeopardize their livelihood, you know they're gonna come after me.
Well, hey, we're not saying any names, right? We're just saying be skeptical, vet some of these people. If you're serious about learning a language and you're looking for good advice, be skeptical, vet these people, and we're not saying who's legit and who's not. That's up for you to decide.
I'm a little scared. But anyway, some people on YouTube are claiming to speak, 5, 10, 15 languages or more. But I think that there's something that's a little bit disingenuous about that, in that they really don't speak it to a high level. And that's fine. Doing something like we just did, a simple introduction, doesn't really take a lot. I really felt like if some of the polyglots, especially in Chinese, were to come into our university in Fudan, that they just would not be able to keep up at all. They would be the weakest foreign student in the class. And I really believe that. So you can have a conversation where you just introduce yourself versus I'm going to go to academia and study this topic. I mean, even something, if you don't mind me doing a little Chinese here, like, I don't know, describing the September 11th terrorist attacks, you're going to have a lot of vocabulary, like, for example, 911事件大概是这个样子。2001年9月份，有几个沙特阿拉伯恐怖分子劫持了美国的飞机，然后在纽约撞到了世贸中心，死了好几个人，应该是美国历史上最可怕的事件之一。Something like that, it's gonna require a lot more vocabulary than just a casual talk, and it's going to require vocabulary that is learned at the advanced level that wouldn't show up in, say, a self-introduction. So doing a presentation at school or talking about more complicated things is going to be a lot more difficult than the kind of things that are being shown on YouTube these days. It doesn't really take too much to get to that level, but that's what I see over and over again with these reaction videos. And then telling people, hey, you can be like me. Let's study 2, 3, 4 languages at once. You can do 15 minutes of Korean in the morning and then switch to Chinese and then do some Japanese and then whatever. Yeah, I think as a language teacher, I think that's a terrible idea.
Yeah. I mean, you'll end up being what they call a jack of all trades, but a master of none, right? It's important to say that there are legitimate polyglots. There are people out there who can speak a bunch of languages at a really high level, but they're rare. And I'd say there's probably much more fake polyglots than there are real polyglots. And the thing is, when you actually look at these legitimate polyglots, they normally spend many years focusing on one language at a time, and it's the result of decades of hard work that they are able to speak multiple languages at a high level. And oftentimes these people dedicate their whole lives, or a giant portion of their lives, to this pursuit. And oftentimes these more legitimate people are not the people who are just showing off their language ability on YouTube. They're more interested in actually engaging in the target culture and just, honing their own abilities, and they don't have as much of a desire to kind of show off and get recognition. And so, on the other hand, when you look at a lot of people on YouTube, yeah, they're people who have basically just learned a tiny bit of a bunch of different languages. Sometimes they know one language decently well, and then a bunch of other languages at a pretty crappy level. But I think what happens is there's this phenomenon called the fluency illusion. This is just my name for it, where basically, if you don't speak a language yourself, you can't judge how good someone else is at a language. And sometimes, even if someone is actually at a pretty low level, to you, they might appear to be totally fluent just because you don't speak the language. Like, a lot of times, for example, I like to think that I am pretty good at Japanese, but sometimes when, I meet someone in real life and they're just an American monolingual English speaker, they find out that I speak Japanese, they'll be like, oh, cool, say something in Japanese. And I'll just say a couple sentences, and they'll be like, wow, you sound totally Japanese, you're so fluent. And I always think, like, yeah, I am, but how do you know? Like, for all I know, I could have just been speaking Korean, So, like, I could have been making tons of grammar mistakes. My pronunciation could have been totally off. I could have been using weird words wrong in unnatural ways. But I just think people don't really stop and think about the fact that, they don't know how good other people are. And a lot of times they are at a really, really kind of low level. It'd be like the equivalent of you took guitar lessons for like 3 weeks and you can play like 1 or 2 songs like really crappily. That is kind of like they can do that for like a bunch of different languages, and there's this illusion that it's really impressive, when in reality, it's not.
Oh, ooh, shots fired.
But one other thing I'll say is that although I do think that these people cause some harm in a way by giving people unrealistic expectations and kind of making people think that language learning is really easy, I also think that they can inspire a lot of people to get excited about language learning and to perhaps start learning language themselves. And I think that that is a really positive thing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I can agree with that. Even with all the sensationalism. Of course, this is YouTube, and at the end of the day, if it's not sensational, it's not going to have much influence. People are not going to watch it. But yeah, I think you made some good points. It's like the tip of the iceberg. It's, when you hear someone like you speak Japanese, you don't really get a full understanding just from a couple minutes of listening to you speak. You don't get a full grasp of like how deep your knowledge goes with this language, and you simply can't get that from just a couple of minutes, but that's all you need to make a YouTube video. So at the end of the day, I saw quite a lot of people making really bad grammar mistakes, errors in the subtitles, like they completely misunderstood what the native speaker said, changed the subtitles to something else. I'm sorry, it was really sloppy work, and some of those people, of course, I only know Chinese and Japanese. That's what I can understand. That's what I can gauge. But if they were saying that was one of their strongest languages, then I really did question everything I saw with the other languages. I was like, so that's the best one. Oh, I don't know. It's one of those things, though. It's one of those things I think people should be aware of. Just know what you're watching, because nobody really wants to be the bad guy and stand out and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to be the party pooper, but about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think ultimately the reason why it's important to talk about this is not because we want people to think that we are more special than other people, right? It's that if a lot of the people watching these videos are serious about trying to learn a language themselves, and if they see this other person who seems to be able to learn a bunch of languages in a really short amount of time, then that's probably going to make those viewers who are struggling to learn just one language to a decent level feel like maybe there's something wrong with them, or they don't have talent, or something like this, when in reality that's not the case at all. The reality is just that learning any language to and even an intermediate level is a difficult thing. And if you're talking about actually trying to reach a level of fluency, then that's something that generally is a multiple year-long pursuit and requires a lot of dedication, regardless of who you are. Talent isn't really that relevant when it comes to language learning, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I see a lot of people going just halfway. So for example, the hardest part of Chinese and Japanese is definitely not the speaking, it's reading and writing. So I've seen far too many people just kind of skip over that entirely and just get to a semi-conversational level. And then you missed most of the work there at that point. The speaking part's not the difficulty of Chinese or Japanese, it's all the other stuff. It's the kanji, it's the grammar, it's writing an essay. That is really hard, or writing kanji by hand without looking at anything. If you skip all that, then you're just taking the shortcut, right?
Yeah, and you really miss out on a lot of what there is to be gained by learning the language. Like, I think a lot of times when people kind of go halfway, like you're saying, with learning a language, they do become conversational, but a lot of times the only reason they're able to have conversations is because the native speaker that they're talking to probably simplifies their speech a little bit. They speak a little bit slower, they enunciate a little more, they use simpler words, and because of that, they're able to have a conversation. But if they actually wanted to have a deeper conversation about, like, what's the meaning of life, is there a God or not, things like this, then I don't really think it'd be feasible to have those type of really meaningful conversations. It's more like kind of surface level everyday things that can happen.
You're absolutely right, and I thought about that many times looking at a lot of the videos, and granted, some of them are pretty legitimate. Even your buddy Steve, I was rather impressed with Steve, though he obviously didn't have perfect Japanese, or he didn't claim to either, but I thought he had a pretty good grasp on the languages, knowing as many as he does. But you're right, the level of conversation just varies so much. So Anything that's been on my channel thus far has been really simple stuff. It was just, I went to a restaurant, I ordered food. And there's a little bit of a strategy to that, by the way, Matt, too. I found that the more complicated Japanese I used, the less views I got. Believe it or not. Because it was like encouraging to viewers, I think. I spent a whole like 2 hours translating a long conversation way back when, and it was with a Japanese person online, and it barely got any views. So I quickly realized that the simpler my Japanese was in the video, the more doable it was, the more relatable it was to the audience, the more they felt encouraged, like, yes, you could do this too. You could order food. You could go up to a stranger and have a simple conversation. This is obtainable. You don't have to live in Japan.
Yeah, and I think another, like you mentioned how you found that when you spoke simpler language, you got a more viewership on your videos, and perhaps one component of that is that when you're just speaking simple language and you're speaking Japanese or Chinese, then you're probably going to get really great reactions out of a native speaker, because the reality is that native Japanese people, and from what I understand, native Chinese people as well, they don't expect foreigners to know Japanese or Chinese at all. So any little bit that you can speak is already going beyond their expectations. So even if you're just saying a couple simple words, even just a basic self-introduction or hello, nice to meet you, is going to get a really positive reaction. And the thing is, the better you get at the language, the better reaction you're going to get up to a point. And then actually, as you continue to get better and better, the reaction that you get from native speakers becomes less and less. And at a certain point, they're not going to make a big deal out of it, because they're not going to be seeing you as a foreigner who somehow learned this hard language. They're just going to see you as another human being. And so when you actually get to the point where you're having a nuanced conversation, well then the Japanese person you're talking to probably isn't viewing you as a foreigner. They're just viewing you as a human being who has thoughts and opinions. And so they're not going to be reacting and making something like a kind of display of like, oh wow, that's so amazing, which is going to be interesting to the audience.
Generally, it doesn't happen. You're absolutely right about that. I've gone out multiple times in the last few weeks to try to do some sort of video in Japanese, and quite frankly, I just had friendly conversations with people. Like, we talked for 30 minutes or so, and they I recorded it. I'm like, nobody's gonna watch this. It's not a reaction. It's just a friendly conversation, and nobody made any funny faces or anything. But I will say, Matt, every once in a while, despite your level, every once in a while you still run into one of those outliers in Japan that still has a big reaction regardless of your level. And that's more common for Chinese as well, because even after going to grad school in China, and I'd say I'm about as close to native level in Chinese as I could get as a non-native speaker. Just after 8 years and studying really, really hard. But despite that, I can still say really simple things and get some weird reactions in China. Japan's a bit different. I can't go to a convenience store even in China sometimes without saying something simple like, 可以给我一个袋子吗? Wow! Like, can you give me a bag? And then I was always very embarrassed by that, though, to tell the truth. So the channel is very ironic that I made, because I turned something that I didn't like into something that's a YouTube channel, and I actually try to provoke people to get some sort of reaction, whereas I used to hate it before. I honestly didn't like it because I was living here and it just got so old after so many years.
Yeah, I kind of have an ambivalent relationship with it too, because every once in a while it can be nice to have somebody think that you're amazing, but definitely it comes to a certain point where you're like, hey, I just want to have a person-to-person interaction, and I don't want to just be viewed as a foreigner who somehow can speak the language. Instead, I just want to kind of get past that and talk about something more meaningful.
Absolutely. It's very encouraging in the beginning, and it's pretty nice as a tourist here, but after 8 years and then just going to a convenience store and you can't even escape it. I really just wanted to buy a sandwich. Like, I really just want to buy a sandwich. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want people looking at me. So how ironic now that I'm now doing a YouTube channel, asking people to look at my videos and look at me. It's really it's like a 180 there. But that's kind of my way of dealing with the stress of living abroad, and kind of like letting it go. Just let it go. It's going to keep happening. And I think it's even more common with languages that foreigners study less often. So Japanese people are more or less used to it. Chinese people are a lot less used to it. If you go to some countries in Southeast Asia, Burma, so Myanmar, or Thailand, or Vietnam, Cambodia, you can speak about 1 or 2 words to them and they're going to be shocked. Doesn't mean that you said it right or said it well or whatever. They're just shocked that you even know anything. So looking at a native speaker's reaction to judge someone's level is not going to be very reliable.
Yeah, it's more a measure of how common is it for other foreigners to learn that language, rather than what level are you actually at.
If I were to speak Russian or learn Russian, it's not my native language. I would start from zero. I don't think that they would be very shocked. I wouldn't go around making a channel shocking Russian people with Russian, because they'd probably think I'm a local.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true, but I think the bigger point is you shouldn't be learning languages because you want to impress people anyway, because that's a really shallow and meaningless motivation.
There are some polyglot YouTube channels that I thought were pretty legitimate. Obviously, I don't know all the languages they speak, but there were a few that really took it far, and obviously they're doing it for views, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I think that everybody needs to know what's going on, that, you know, some of this language advice, it just made me cringe, Matt. I was just cringing as a language teacher. Just, why are you telling them this? Oh no, don't do that, please.
Yeah, I would say in terms of legitimate polyglots, I would definitely say Steve Kaufman's a legitimate polyglot, Luca Lampariello, Richard Simcott.
This guy Alexander, I can't remember his last name, but he's also, I'm pretty sure, pretty accomplished polyglot. And
but they're not the richest ones. They're not the richest ones, man. You gotta be a businessman about this. You want to make some bank. They're making ridiculous amounts of money. Like, I gotta give them that. That is smart. That is smart. If you want to really make a lot of money, that's very smart.
Yeah, can't knock him as a business person.
No, you can't. Clearly, very successful. Like, lots of views, lots of people buying this software, and you know, playing into the sensational aspect of YouTube. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, can you make motivational videos, and 2, can you make entertaining videos? Are your videos entertaining? Because that is going to be number 1. So that's really the main point of this. You as a viewer, viewers out there, please understand that YouTube is for the sensational stuff, for reactions and videos. And they can inspire you, but remember, it's YouTube.
Healthy skepticism.
Healthy skepticism, that's right. All right, thank you so much, Matt, and I hope we can work together again.
ぜひぜひ。
All right, じゃあね、バイバイ。